So I've always been a fan of natural history in a way, and I find the idea of a fictionalized memoir really interesting. And that brings us to today's book, A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir of Lady Trent. In her own world, she's a legendary figure who helped reshape the world's very idea of the nature of dragons, which is pretty interesting and cool to hear about this person's story and her history. As I stated a moment ago, this is written as a memoir of Lady Trent, the fictionalized character. Sort of like a first person perspective, but she's actually writing down the story from her perspective, which is kind of weird to say. As such, we go into her history, her childhood, her courtship, and all the stuff like that, as she's fueled by an age old curiosity from childhood to now present about dragons. And this is pretty much her origin story, going over the science of dragons that fueled her into the person she is today. So if you can't tell, I really do enjoy this book. I love dragons and curiously glance at almost any story that involves them in one way, shape, or form. It helps that in this story, the dragons are more a natural part of the world and not a supernatural presence. It's kind of like how in How to Train Your Dragon, while the dragons have these fantastic elements, they're still very much in the nature of the world. Albeit this is a bit, well, way less cartoony than the cartoony kids show, movie, and book series. Lady Trent herself is a delight of a character. Again, for her world being based upon the old school British Empire in its own way, it's the whole standard courtship, lords, ladies, all that kind of stuff. And of course, he's an eccentric who everyone calls absurd and all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of cliche. But she's still an enjoyable and great character in this story. Again, this is still from her perspective, so of course, if she turned out not to be a great character, it would be kind of crappy. And again, since the story is still from her perspective, we get her insights on the various characters around her, from her father to her mother to her eventual husband and various other people she meets along the way. And of course, her fascination with dragons. As I stated earlier, this book is pretty much just an origin story for the person she would eventually grow into, as well as her first big adventure. Again, it goes over her childhood, adulthood, slightly, and details her first majorly big adventure and where she started on her journey of, being a dragon scientist, for lack of a better term, which honestly sounds really cool. With that said, there isn't really much to constitute a plot that would be going into major spoilers for this story. So, if you're looking for a recommendation, I do recommend this. This is just another simple story where a girl grows up, meets a boy who supports her, and the pair go off on an adventure, and that adventure changes her life. Again, this is an origin story, and there are later books that detail further adventures, and maybe one day I'll take a look at those, but I honestly feel I should probably be talking about this whole book as a series, not just as a book by itself, because again, this is a pretty simple book, but one that does come recommended for how enjoyable it ultimately turns out to be.